Hello, folks. Now we have Christo talking about dragging out dragons, slaying hidden threats in residential and mobile IP proxies. As a reminder, please put your questions for Christo on Slido, bsidesSF.org/Q&A. And with that, Christo, take it away.
Okay. Okay, so I'm super excited to talk to all of you because of, first off, this is my second B-Sides, and I love B-Sides, super cool conference. And this is the first time I've ever given any security talk that's not from my company Cloudflare, but on my own idea and my own research, my own ideas. And this talk itself is about something that affects everybody in this room and everyone in this room knows, just about. But because we all use data from web scrapers, we all want the cheapest flights online. We all want the cheapest hotels, and these IP proxies are used to grab that data and present it the cheapest prices, but a lot of other reasons too. So I think this is super relevant, especially in this day and age of AI. So personally, I'm just a curious dragon hunter, like a lot of the people in this room. I'm not a pro like maybe some of these people in this room, but I submitted this talk track in December as a kind of a whim of just seeing if I could get accepted. I got accepted, and then I had to go do the research over the last couple of months to figure out what this stuff is really all about. So I've watched about 20 YouTube videos and read about 20 or 30 articles, and this talk is the result of that, and hopefully it can help you guys have some jumping off points to learn more. I am what's called a solutions engineer. Some people call us sales engineers. I hate sales, but I'm I call it a dot connector for customers, kind of a technical consultant at Cloudflare, where my customers are social networks, crypto exchanges, and gig economy platforms, the kinds that advertise at the Super Bowl level out of Northern California. I've been there 3 years. Before that, I was 7 years at Akamai, where I really cut my teeth in cybersecurity. They really taught me from the ground up, and I've been running with it with Cloudflare with our amazing technology from there. And I will have this slide at the very end as well with a QR code for my LinkedIn profile. I'd love to connect with everybody in this room, further the conversation here, collaborate on other projects as well. And for starters, this is my family last week in Oaxaca, Mexico. I highly recommend that little city or town. And I've been to Mexico 4 or 5 times, always on the coast. Oaxaca, incredible artwork, incredibly diverse food and great people. And I want to start here with a question that my kids were asking me on that trip. A question that all of us have probably asked ourselves at one point in time. Definitely, if you have kids, they probably asked you this, because I didn't want them on their phones the whole time. So I brought a book with us, a great piece of child's literature. And they kept asking me, "Dad, where's Waldo? Can't find him anywhere." Well, I think it's pretty unfair that Waldo is hiding behind a wall. I mean, it is part of his name, but that's just not cool. I made it really tough to find him. But the real question for this audience oh yeah, I see some people pointing there. There are 10 dragons in here. Can you find all 10 of those? Those are hiding behind all the real authentic users. And that's what this is about, using these residential and mobile IP proxies to hide behind legitimate users that you want visiting your sites. And these dragons are doing things like account takeover attacks. They're doing things like scraping data for gray purposes or building the next LLM model. They might be not on your website, but over on Ticketmaster competing with you for the latest Coachella tickets so they can sell them at 20x. Maybe even the latest Blue Origin tickets. Okay, I don't think anyone here is buying Blue Origin tickets, so maybe we'll move on from there. But what this talk is about. First, we're going to look at this from the adversarial point of view. I mean, I'm more of a white hatter myself, so we're going to look at it from the gray and black hat point of view, and we're going to give a kind of a 101 and hopefully some 201 of what these IP proxies are, or I'm going to start calling them proxies for the sake of time here. And then we're going to pivot to a white hat perspective on how to think about detecting these and therefore eventually mitigating the activity coming from them. And what this talk is not about is any endorsements. There are some incredible tools out there from the adversarial point of view, those gray and black hats, and I will call out a bunch of them, but I'm not going to endorse any of them. And same thing, I'm not going to endorse any provider like Cloudflare to be the best tool to go after these guys. I'm just going to call out a lot of jumping off points for people to learn about and think about on your own, and potentially collaborate with me on exploring further if you'd like. And the big thing I'm not going to do is give away any silver bullets, because there are none. This is a constant cat and mouse game of anti-bot vendors and you all out there fighting the good fight on the white hat side, and the other side trying to get ahead over and over and over again. So there's no silver bullets. Your mileage may vary with any of these types of solutions. So for starters, who's using these proxies? Well, I love this graphic. I hate the word hackers, because you don't have to be a hacker to use this stuff. So I threw up a big asterisk there, and think about these as actors, whether they're good actors or gray actors or bad actors. And I never knew that these hackers came in so many colors. I always thought of them as black, white, and gray, and those are the ones we're going to be focusing on for this talk. But there are, people out there that are unskilled using these same tools. In fact, I learned when I first started doing this research, one of the YouTube videos I came across was from someone building out their OnlyFans profiles and trying to create multiple OnlyFans accounts, a couple hundred of them, using the same laptop. And therefore they stumbled upon this idea of mobile and residential proxies, and was explaining how they work, because they figured out how they worked and they wanted to share with everybody else. So there's a lot of people out there that aren't necessarily the super skilled in cyber actions that are also using the same tools. So like I said, we're going to take this first half and focus on the gray to black hat point of view. And with that, why use these things? Well, this is more of a gray market kind of slide here, this graphic that I found. There's a lot of black hat stuff that you could also do with the same approach. And here we're looking at the idea of using a residential proxies. But let's start up with the sneaker bots in my top left here. Finding the latest sneaker drops, whether it's on Nike or elsewhere. There's a lot of money to be made really easily there, of just being able to be the fastest bot or having multiple requests going at the exact same time and try and beat everyone else by a millisecond to get those sneakers. And those, say for Nike.com as an example, they are working to stop, a bunch of requests coming in from the same users. They want to allow everyone to get a fair chance. So they're going to try and stop you. And the best way they can the best method they can do that with is based on your IP address. So they're going to try and rate limit you that way. Same kind of thing with if someone doesn't want you to scrape their website. We all know probably about robots.txt, which is kind of a joke, but that's the way that most companies would try and stop you from scraping their website, but you don't really have to pay attention to that if you're kind of a gray hat or darker. Ad verification and travel fare aggregation, those are two different use cases and SEO monitoring. Those are all kind of, I would consider more white hat. There's full businesses that run to check Google results in another country with, very quickly and to see if the right ads load in different countries. And those are all kind of legitimate quote unquote use cases for using these kinds of tools. Now I do call out in the middle that although this image shows a residence, these proxies can also be done with mobile devices, which we'll get into. Those are actually the strongest method of doing this. And there's also data center proxies. I found about 25 different versions of proxies, and including VPNs and Tor exit nodes or Tor itself. And I'll talk about the differences between those long tail of why you wouldn't use those long tail of proxies. But the real three that I'm going to focus on are data center a little bit, but really mobile and residential, because those are what most scrapers would use overall. And I will get into more detail about why you would use one versus the other. I do want to also call out social media automation. I mentioned that OnlyFans person earlier. There's a lot of multi-accounting going on these days, and to upvote posts, to have it all AI run the whole show and go viral just using AI with putting a image out there of Jesus on a piece of bacon or something like that, and then having a bunch of fake accounts upvote it to get the algorithm going and the juices flowing, and then all of a sudden go viral and make money off it that way. That kind of an approach. So Most business organizations would try and stop that from happening, but using mobile proxies, it's really hard to detect and stop that, as I'll show you. So we talked about the who and the why of proxies, but the what they are and how do they work, we're going to get into that here. So a couple of key concepts to understand. I think everyone in this room probably knows what IP addresses are. I thought I knew what they were too, and there's IPv4 and IPv6, sure. But what the concept I want to get across here, a couple of concepts about IP addresses, is that they're really, like a phone number, two different addresses that any system or person needs to communicate across the internet back and forth, the one versus the other. And that's great and all, but the thing is that they stay relatively static for some period of time, depending on what type of IP addresses they are. A residential IP address would stay static longer. A mobile IP address, on the other hand, is very dynamic. If you're driving your car around, your phone is jumping from tower to tower to tower and getting different IP addresses on the fly. In addition, I use T-Mobile, and I bet, I don't know, 20 people in this room probably have the same exact public IP address if you're on T-Mobile right now on my phone in my pocket that you have in your pocket. And so because of that, just like going back to that Where's Waldo picture, if I'm doing something, gray or black market kind of approach, and you're trying to go to the same Nike store, you might get rate limited because of what I'm doing. And Nike does not want that to happen. They want to sell their shoes. They want you to get in. They don't want to block you and have a false positive. So therefore, that's why the mobile IP addresses are kind of the most valuable from a adversarial point of view. Because they have a very high reputation, a very high authenticity, because organizations don't want to have false positives. So I talked about IP addresses being relatively static, although they do change, and they're point-to-point communications. And really, I think the big takeaway with IP addresses, it's about authenticity, and they end up getting a fraud score, based on what organizations see happening with them at any given moment in time. I mean, when I was at Akamai, they would basically, an IP address would go into a penalty box for a couple of minutes. And then when it started not doing bad stuff, it would come out of the penalty box. And that's kind of a risky game to play, is to rate limit based on IP address. But that's one of the key signals to rate limit on. And because everything else in a request, most everything else in a request is very changeable on the fly, like a user agent. I mean, come on, we can all spoof user agents super simply. It's pretty hard to near impossible to spoof an IP address, and that's why these proxy tools exist. So next up, is network address translation and carrier grade net. And these are two different methods of handling the problem, the scarcity with IPv4. So IPv4, created back, I think, in the 80s. We passed out the last IPv4 /8 in 2010. And since then, actually back in 94, I think it was, we created NAT and carrier grade NAT to be able to handle all of the mobile devices out there in the world and all these IoT devices, just basically way more devices than we ever thought we would need. And so with NAT and carrier grade NAT, you can have private IP addresses, like I'll show in a couple of diagrams here, that are hiding behind a single public IP address that goes out to the world. So think about like a library or my hotel that I'm staying at. Everyone in there probably has the same public IP address going out to the world with their own private IP addresses, with everyone signing into different Wi-Fi networks. The same thing here at the conference. Next concept is these anti-detect browsers. So a key way to detect bad malicious activity would be to look at the IP address, notice that it might be like, say, in Berlin, and yet the browser says that it is in San Francisco. And that's a clear signal that someone's doing something sketchy there. It's a signal, it's not the signal that they definitely need to be cut off, but that's the kind of a thing that can happen, and that's what anti-detect browsers come into play, to be able to make sure that everything in the browser that it's sending out into the public, into a website, will match the IP address, right? So there's these tools called the anti-detect browsers that most real serious malicious actors would use. And then, of course, there's anti-bot vendors like Cloudflare, where I work, and Akamai and Datadome, and a handful of others I'll get to as well. So super basic proxy. Think about it as maybe like a a waiter in a restaurant. It's basically acting on someone else's behalf. That's the way I think about it. And each of the three different systems here or users have an IP address, right? So here maybe we have the example of someone hitting airline websites to find the cheapest airfare and be able to update on the fly Expedia or the like, to be able to sell airfare and make a small commission on those things, right? Well, when that same user puts on a gray or a black hat, now all of a sudden they can use the proxy server as a Trojan horse to be able to get over to that internet and not be seen, and therefore their IP address becomes private and they become relatively anonymous, and they can get away with doing a lot more that way. So from a residential point of view, again, you have those private IPs over in the back and the public IPs out in front. Like here we're showing going to Ticketmaster, buying tickets, Nike, hit the latest sneaker drop, going to a social network and making things go viral. So all of us probably have 99% of our bandwidth at home, and all these different IP addresses that our router could support as private IPs on the back end. And we're not using all of that. It goes unused. So you could, right now, you could make money by reselling your bandwidth to a proxy provider that acts as a middleman that would go resell that bandwidth out to these gray, black hats, or even white hats that need this service. And so you could run some software at home and basically, pay for your home internet and maybe make some more money on the side. So that's a complete business that happens out there, especially these last couple of years as AI has taken off and web scraping is so prolific. But from a mobile point of view, it gets even a stronger use case here, where sure, all the, as you see the different hops here, they're all private IPs until it hits the cell tower. It goes out as a public IP on the internet. But with mobile, it's even easier to have a bunch of SIM cards and bandwidth on all those SIM cards, whether they're whether somebody owns them or whether they've been compromised. But this is even kind of a stronger approach, especially like I described before, about how these mobile IP proxies have the best reputation overall because they seem the most authentic to these websites over on the far right. And those websites never want to block any of them. So I mentioned Tor and VPN earlier. Yes, those are proxies as well. Let's start off with Tor. Let's look at the second row there, proxy detectability. The thing with Tor and VPNs is that even at Cloudflare, we have easy rules that anybody could run that will just shut them down right away if a website owner wants to do that. They're called Tor exit nodes or VPN exit nodes. And so it's like those IPs are all known to any provider, and it's very easy to block those out of the gate, especially for something like a sneaker drop page that's very sensitive to someone coming in there from elsewhere. Also, Tor and VPN are very slow. When you're scraping data, when you're doing account takeovers, you want something very fast and can handle a lot of bandwidth. And so that's where residential and mobiles come into play. And they don't have data center on here. Data center proxies are a thing, and they are very fast and they're very reliable. They're not going to go offline. But they too have known IP addresses, so therefore they don't change around as much, and therefore they're much easier to detect. So there might be use cases where data center proxies are valuable, but typically residential are kind of the middle ground there with harder to detect. And with residential mobile, you get a much bigger geographic footprint that you can pull from, so there's value there. But the mobile is by far the strongest because of their overall reputation and never wanting to have false positives. So because of this, over the last few years, in fact, I guess it started in about 2017 with Bright Data. They actually sold the company in 2017 for $200 million. But they claim to be like a good guy, ethically sourced IP addresses. I talked to someone in the audience here, opening here, and talking about how, hey, some people buy out Chrome extensions to be able to use this bandwidth and IP space. So there are ethically sourced IPs and unethically sourced IPs. I'll get to a couple of use cases there in a moment. But the point is that there are all these proxy providers out there now that will resell this data or this bandwidth and these IP addresses to be able to pull this off and allow the gray and black hat actors to do stuff anonymously on the internet. Here's Smart Proxy, one of the most popular ones that I've seen these days. In the bottom left there, you see that that's what the mobile proxy pricing looks like for $4.50. Top middle residential proxies, next most expensive, and that'd be per gigabyte, of course. And middle bottom data center proxies, a heck of a lot cheaper, much easier to detect. But depending on your use case, your mileage may vary. A lot of these proxy providers might have an extra style of approach. There's these ones that offer rotating IPs or dedicated IPs, so no one's going to muddy up your IP reputation while you're using them at the same time. So there's a lot of different approaches, and you really, if you're going to use one of these tools, you not only would pay for it and have a free trial or use it for a while paid, but you're going to really want to kick the tires on it a lot to make sure that it's legit before you start really going to town with it. So I mentioned the mobile is the most valuable and the most kind of bang for your buck. So this has led to the rise of these mobile proxy farms. As you see in the top left and the top right, we've got Android phones. You could run full. They all have SIM cards in them, of course, so you could resell all that data yourself. Call out to the Web Scraping Club if you really want to get into this. I highly recommend his YouTube channel and his website talking about how to build these things out or how do they approach things. He even interviews the people on the bot vendor side as well, so he looks at it a very clear point of view on each side. In the middle there, we've got what they call dongles, these where they all have SIM cards inside them, but whole companies like Proxies will sell you a whole kit you could run at home. I mean, heck, you could run this on Raspberry Pi. They even talk about how you could run on your own Android phone and get a couple of IPs for free, and as long as there's a SIM card in there. But you could imagine that people are buying this stuff up and reselling this to these proxy providers, and making money on their own, making passive income on their own. I mean, I thought about doing this once I started learning this on my own. But the one that I find pretty funny is the one on the right there. This actually is showing someone doing this inside of a bus or a van or something, and they're driving around to be able to have more authenticity with their IPs, having them change more often, and therefore maybe selling them as a premium. And then this has led to proxy jacking. This is a colleague of mine when I was at Akamai. He had a honeypot set up, and he's from the Akamai threat intelligence team, and he found that an attacker compromised a architectural firm in Libya and was able to get into their systems and then close all the back doors so no one else can get in and make sure no one else was in there from an adversarial point of view. And then he just started reselling their IP addresses, their private IPs, using their public IPs externally, going out externally, and reselling their bandwidth. They didn't even know about it. And he was running this stuff for years and being able to just make passive income this way. I think this guy Alan was talking about this as the latest attacker side hustle there you see on the bottom. But basically it's kind of a cool way to make some passive income and never get caught, and just keep doing that over and over again. And so it's the same thing as like building out a proxy farm, but instead you're just using someone else's site to do it. Similar to what I mentioned earlier about buying out a Chrome extension and kind of maybe using that to be able to grab some bandwidth and some IP space to resell in the open market. So we talked about, the what proxies are, how they work, and the differences between residential and mobile. And then when you layer in these anti-detect browsers, I just wanted to throw this up there because to just give you an idea of the names of them, and calling out that like Go Login and multi-login. Those are kind of expensive, I think, relative to the rest at least. So they must offer something really good. I didn't have enough time to go into and use these, but that was my next step in this research, is to be able to run one of these anti-detect browsers, put my credit card down or a prepaid credit card probably, and attach it to some of these IP proxies and be able to run some tests and see if I could get past these defensive techniques I'm going to be showing you next. And I wanted to just call out a graphic here for if just to think about if you combine those, especially the mobile proxies, along with the auto-detect browsers, and if you do that at scale and turn that into a botnet, there is a lot of power in that. Like you could easily run up full, really strong DDoS campaigns that can't be rate limited by IP address. You could do incredibly strong account takeover attacks that can't be rate limited by IP address. You could do vulnerability scanning, actual full attacks. You could do a lot of the gray hat stuff and make a lot of money that way. So there's a lot of not just power in doing this, but motivation for those actors to be able to put these pieces together. And again, you don't have to be a hardcore black hat or gray hat. You could be a script kiddie and kind of get away with a lot of this stuff, like that guy I was learning about at OnlyFans. If they kind of like put the pieces together and got together. And so how do you stop it, right? I mean, that's my company's job. A big part of it is how to detect this stuff and therefore be able to have a horse in the race to be able to start doing some mitigation. So I'm going to walk through a couple of DIY techniques just to kind of lay the groundwork with how you could kind of start thinking about it. I'm going to call out some tool approach of using tools. That's kind of we're going to take a good, better, best approach here. And then I'm talk about how to hire an army to fight these dragons and track them down. And that's really kind of using the pros, like Cloudflare and the Cloudflare like companies. So from a DIY approach, let's see, we've got just calling out a couple of ideas. If people get sloppy, they let headers go, and there are a couple of headers out there like X-forwarded for and the like. I think I've read about 4 or 5 of them. They're not always the same, but sometimes some headers will slip and say that, hey, look, I'm coming at you from a proxy because I'm forwarding it for another IP address. Super sloppy, but it happens. Next up, geolocation mismatch. This is a geolocation mismatch between what the browser says that its geolocation is. Some browsers, Chrome will ask you, do you mind sharing your location? They might share their IP address from a browser point of view. And if that doesn't match the IP address that the request is coming from, then there's a mismatch there. Or maybe the language that the browser accepts, like, I'll show you an example in a second here about that. But and then web RTC leak detection. There's also a DNS leak detection where you could challenge the browser and have it come back and tell you what it thinks the IP address is. So those are all ideas. I had a 10 here total, but I didn't want to put them all on the screen for sake of time and all. But and then I think the strongest approaches from a DIY technique is to try and use honeypots, although the mileage may vary there, and try and use machine learning, perhaps. That's probably the strongest approach. But I know this is an eye chart. Don't worry about reading it. I just wanted to call out browserleaks.com as there's all kinds of pieces of your website your request to a website that give indicators here. Here I'm using my VPN to come out of Berlin. It passed the WebRTC check because it had the same IP address. But it does call out that I'm coming from a VPN, so it saw that. It says that I'm not coming from Tor, so it would know if I did that. I'm showing English from my browser, so it doesn't match German, so that might be a signal. But I just wanted to call out that there are tons of characteristics of your request that could go combine with an IP address to give out a strong signal that this might be a bad actor. On the honeypot side, when I started Googling it, I saw a couple of research papers about how to do it, but there are a ton of proxy providers telling you how to get around it. So mileage may vary completely there. From a machine learning point of view, sure, you could try and DIY it if you have enough data, but it's really about number one, high quality, labeled, really clearly labeled data. But you got to have a lot of data to be able to do this. And sure, you got to clean it and, all the regular ML stuff. This is an article in my deck, and I'm happy to share the slides later to show you more detail about it if you're interested in trying to ML it yourself. But the next better approach to do it, to detect these things, is using tools. So there are a number of these tools out there that are much more affordable than going with the pros, where they're basically staying up to speed with the latest and greatest of the different techniques that I talked about earlier. So that might be a good way to approach it if you're at that level. Here I am using my VPN. Where before I was not using my VPN, so I was all clean. But you can see that my VPN score shot up to 100%. My proxy score is at 20%. It would be interesting to see if using a proxy provider and an auto detect browser, if where these different tools would rank you. And then, really, I think if your data is really valuable, then it's really about contracting with the pros. And so, this is the latest bot report. You can look it up yourself from Forrester. Cloudflare, I feel like we should be up higher to the right. Of course, we feel like that, but we kind of went heavy in AI. The reporter didn't like us doing that as much for some reason, but these are the leaders in that space. And Datadome does a great article from 2022 how they built out their ML model, and their PhD VP of research has a great YouTube video from Black Hat about how they used ML to build out their models. So there's an approach there. Cloudflare last year created our own ML model to try and detect these. This is what I based this abstract on to be able to speak here today. And without going into the detail about how we did our model and get into machine learning, I just want to call out these three things on the right here. The way our approach is to aim for network integrity with the IP addresses that are coming towards us, and using ML and some other characteristics of that, coupling that with the session integrity, what the requesters are doing during that session. And then if the customer wants to do it, then they're using turnstile. You guys have all seen this around the internet, to during the exact action that they're doing, like checking out with a sneaker, to be able to challenge them, and having those three things all match up to allow them to get through. And call out for turnstile. There's no CAPTCHAs, there's no puzzles. We hate CAPTCHAs at Cloudflare. You guys have all seen this around. If you paid for it, you could white label it yourself. But the point is, you could use this, and many people do all over the internet, for free, with unlimited usage. You don't even have to have your website on Cloudflare CDN to do it. The way it works is you put JavaScript in your page, there's a token that gets generated, it comes back, and then when the user goes to the next page to do anything else, like checking out, then that token would need to be validated and verified. Therefore, it can't be reused by other attackers. So 5 key takeaways. Proxies are super sneaky and growing in momentum, with mobile being the strongest. Most of this is not illegal, which is frustrating as heck, and it can easily be super costly to businesses and to users, but also we kind of benefit from some of this stuff as well, being users that want cheap airfare. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy that way. The anti-botting is always going to be a game of cat and mouse, and it's always going to be an interesting one. It's important to take the strongest stance. If security is most important to you, then you should probably consider going with the pros. And you're never going to be perfect. You're always going to have false positives. So aim for progress over perfection. And with that, QR code of my LinkedIn page, and easy to find me at Christo@cloudflare.com. Welcome any other questions. Ping me if you want the slides. And I gave away a lot of anonymity glasses to the people that were here early. If you didn't get them, I've got another 10 or 12 pairs. Come find me outside, and I will give you some of these cool cybersecurity glasses so that you can ensure your anonymity, whether you're a gray hat or a white hat, trying to hide from the gray hats. Thank you.
Thank you, Christo. And our next talk will start in 15 minutes.